So, how in the world do you get from a simple, kind of messy rule about dripping animal fat all the way to a profound legal principle that can govern life and death decisions? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are taking a deep dive into one single passage of the Talmud to see how these ancient rabbis did just that and, what it can teach us about dealing with uncertainty in our own lives.
All right, let's just jump right in with a question that seems pretty simple on the surface, but it just spirals into this incredible legal puzzle. Picture a butcher's block, right? You've got a piece of forbidden fat on one side and a perfectly good, kosher piece of meat on the other. So can the bad one ruin the good one without them even touching? Let's find out. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start in the physical world with some messy animal fat. Then we'll get inside the head of the person actually doing the slaughtering. From there, we'll look at the all-important inspection. And finally, we're going to land on this really powerful legal tool that helps us make decisions when we just don't have all the answers. Okay, so our whole story kicks off in a pretty surprising place, with a very practical, hands-on instruction from a sage named Alimar about how you're supposed to handle a specific cut of meat. The rule itself is pretty simple, but the details are everything. Imagine a flank steak. It's got a layer of fat on it that isn't kosher. Abimar's warning is basically this. If you flip that flank over and put it on top of another piece of meat, the warmth from the freshly slaughtered animal is going to cause that fat to melt and drip down, and boom, it contaminates the meat below. Seems straightforward, right? But of course, this is the Talmud we're talking about, and no statement ever goes unchallenged. The other rabbis immediately pounce on the logic. They're like, wait a second, if that fat is so ready to melt, why doesn't it melt and ruin its own meat when the flank is just sitting there right side up? It's a fantastic question, and it forces us to look way closer. And the answer is surprisingly simple. It's just anatomy. There's a thin, natural membrane on the underside of the flank, and it acts as a perfect little barrier, protecting the meat from the fat right above it. And this is the kicker. The problem isn't really the fat itself, it's the process. The membrane on the top of the flank is so delicate that the simple act of the slaughterer touching it with their hand is enough to break it down. That's what creates the path for the fat to escape. So the very act of preparing the meat is what creates the potential problem in the first place. So, this incredible attention to detail naturally leads us to the next question. Who exactly is qualified to handle such a delicate process? The Talmud now pivots, shifting its focus from the meat itself to the mind of the slaughterer, the shochet. Now, this isn't just about being a skilled butcher, not at all. The Talmud elevates ritual slaughter to this almost sacred art form. It's a skill that a Torah scholar is literally required to learn, putting it right up there with writing holy texts and performing the most basic rituals. That tells you just how seriously they took this.
And here's a really key idea. It's not enough to just be good with your hands. The Talmud makes this huge argument that a sharp knife and a steady hand are basically worthless if you don't have a deep, deep understanding of the law. Your knowledge is way more important than your technical skill. A qualified slaughterer had to have memorized the 5 cardinal sins of the process. Any one of these, and the meat is instantly non-kosher. You've got shechita, which is any interruption at all, drasa, pressing down too hard, halada, hiding the knife in the cut, hagrama, cutting in the wrong place, and aker, which is ripping instead of slicing. I mean, one wrong move, and the whole thing is invalid.
So what does this mean in the real world? It means you can't just trust what you see. You could watch someone slaughter an animal, and it looks absolutely perfect. But if they haven't been trained in the law, you just can't be sure the meat is actually kosher. They could have made a tiny mistake, a split-second pause you didn't even see, and they might not have even known they did it. This obsession with certainty and knowledge brings us to the next logical step, verification. See, it's not enough to just know the rules. You have to prove you actually followed them. And that is where the post-slaughter inspection comes in. The job is absolutely not done when the cut is made. The slaughterer then has to become an inspector. They have to carefully examine the animal's windpipe and gullet to make 100% sure the cut was clean and correct. This is the final seal of approval. In fact, the importance of this inspection is so profound that it literally becomes a unit of measurement in other areas of the law. When another law talks about a pause that's long enough to ruin something, the rabbis actually debate, well, how long is that? Is it the time it takes to inspect the organs after the cut, or the time it takes to check the knife for nicks and imperfections before? This just shows you that the act of inspection is right at the heart of how they thought about the law. Okay, so we've got the rules, we've got the qualifications, and we've got the whole verification process. But now we come to the ultimate question, the one all of this has been building towards. What happens when the system breaks down? What do we do when we are faced with pure, total uncertainty?
So here's the test case. A qualified slaughterer makes what looks like a perfect cut. But then they make a huge mistake. They forget to do the final inspection. So now you have this piece of meat, and it's just sitting there in limbo. Is it kosher? Is it not? How on earth do we decide?
Well, the Talmud gives us two competing answers. Now, they both agree you can't eat the meat, but they disagree on just how forbidden it is. One ruling calls it a tereifa, which means it was improperly slaughtered, but it's otherwise clean. The stricter opinion, though, calls it a nevela, which is like an animal that just dropped dead of natural causes. Not only can you not eat it, but it's also considered ritually impure. Big difference.
Now, to understand this conflict, we need to bring in one of the most powerful and, frankly, coolest concepts in all of Jewish law, hazaka. It's a really simple but brilliant idea for navigating uncertainty. It basically says that we assume something stays in its last known state until we have solid proof that it's changed.
Think of the animal's kosher status like a light switch. When it's alive, the switch is in the off position. It's forbidden to eat. A proper, verified slaughter flips that switch to on. Now it's permitted. But what about our uninspected animal? The slaughter happened, but it was never verified. So is the switch on? Is it off? Or is it flickering somewhere in between? That's the whole question.
And that, right there, is the heart of the matter. These two different rulings aren't just random opinions. They represent a deep disagreement about how to use chizaka when you're flying blind. When you have absolutely no information, what should your default assumption be?
The stricter view says, look, if we don't know for sure it was done right, we have to assume it was done wrong. So the animal reverts back to its original state, forbidden. And an improperly slaughtered animal is a nevela, which is ritually impure. But the more lenient view says, whoa, hang on a second. We can assume it's forbidden to eat, sure, but we can't assume it's ritually impure, because when it was alive, it wasn't impure to begin with. It's a subtle difference, but it's a crucial one.
And so, there you have it. Our journey is complete. We started with the messiness of a butcher's block and ended up with this powerful, elegant legal tool for navigating the unknown. From dripping fat to the slaughterer's mind, to the very nature of proof and doubt, we've seen how the Talmud builds an entire world of meaning from the tiniest of details.
And this ancient debate really leaves us with a very modern question. In our own lives, when we're faced with a situation where we just can't know the truth, what's our default setting? Do we assume the worst? Hope for the best? Or do we find some way to live with the uncertainty? The Talmud doesn't give us an easy answer, but it gives us an amazing framework for asking the question.